If by chance you know the words, feel free to join into the chant. And it's interesting, when I shared that this morning at first service, one of our members came through the line after first service and said that happened to be her favorite mantra. She's an Indian woman, and she said her mother used to always sing this particular mantra to her, and she wrote me the words. Our member, mother singing this mantra to her. And the words are, "Dear God, you are my mother, my father, universal, my friend, the knowledge, the wealth. You are everything, O God of all." But what a small world. Isn't that beautiful? Beautiful, beautiful. And she said it just brought back a lot of memories. At first, when she was young and she heard her mom sing that to her, she said it sounded like mumbo jumbo. But as I got older, I liked it. And so it was really special for her to hear it in our community. So anyway, we will have the blessing of this beautiful mantra. And throughout our meditation time, from the start to the finish, our practice is mindfulness. And it is simply to consistently practice being aware of the breath as we take it into the body, and aware of the breath as we let it go. And we usually begin, as we will this morning, with 3 conscious breaths as taught by Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'll tell you what that is in just a minute. We'll go right through it. And then we also do a little bit of the heart math technique, a lock-in technique, where we focus on the area of the heart. We imagine our breath moving in and throughout the heart, and we hold a positive feeling. And that helps to put our heart in a state called coherence. And then we spend time in silence. If you're new to meditation or your meditation practice is a little inconsistent, be patient with yourself. Sometimes the mind wanders more often than others. Just when you notice it wandering, bring it back to the breath. And with practice, you'll get better and better. So go ahead and find a comfortable position in your chair. And then when you feel ready, go ahead and close your eyes. And take just a moment to make sure that you feel nice and like you're sitting up nice and straight in your chair with your back nice and straight. And just let your hands fall in your lap in a comfortable way, whatever way feels natural and comfortable to you. Let your feet rest flat on the floor, making physical contact with the floor. And then just notice your breathing right now without judging it. No judgment, just notice it. And go ahead and take a deep conscious breath in. And as you let that breath go, practice the feeling, letting go. Take another deep and conscious breath in. And with this exhalation, practice the feeling, being here, right here. And a third deep breath in. And then letting that breath go. And practice the feeling, opening up. Continue to be aware of the breath. Easy breath in, easy breath out. Letting go. Being right here. Opening up. Throughout the beautiful mantra, keep your attention gently focused on the breath. Steady, effortless effort.
Tvameva mantaja Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bantushka Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidyadra Vidyarami Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Mantaja Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandushka Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidyadra Vidyam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Mantaja Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bantushka Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidyadra Vidyam Tvameva Tvameva Savam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Mantaja Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bantushka Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidyadra Vidyam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva
continuing to follow each mindful breath and allowing the body to be relaxed and still. Quiet and centered, peaceful and calm. Allow your attention to drop to the center of the chest, to your heart, imagining that each mindful breath is moving in and through the heart. Quiet mind, open heart, quiet mind, open heart. With heart-focused attention, allow yourself to feel a positive emotion, such as love or joy or peace, gratitude. Breathing that quality into your being, releasing that quality out to the world around you. Quiet and calm, centered and peaceful. As we prepare to practice for a few minutes in complete stillness and silence, be gentle with yourself. If you notice your attention wanders, simply bring it right back to the very next breath. No judgment, just practice. Quiet mind, heart-focused attention in the silence. Now begin to let your attention rise to the surface, preparing to bring your time of meditation and prayer to a close. And take just a moment to feel the feeling of gratitude. Maybe silently say, "Thank you, God. Thank you, Spirit." Just a moment of appreciation for being together in stillness and peace and quiet with our spiritual family and friends. And so it is. Amen. We've been exploring together Robert Brume's book, Finding Yourself in Transition, Using Life's Changes for Spiritual Awakening. We're in the third of a four-part series. In week one, we took just a broad look at the idea of change, and we really focused on the truth that change is inevitable, but transition and transformation are by choice, and how important it is for us to realize that the changes that happen in our lives can be the very thing that bring us to a place of spiritual awakening if we choose to participate with them in a very conscious and very deliberate way. Last week we took a look at the idea that there are three very distinct stages in any change that leads to transition and transformation, and that those stages apply regardless of the kind of change that we might be experiencing. So whether it is a health change or a lifestyle change or a major relationship change, the stages are still the same. The stages are endings, the void, and beginnings. Endings, the void, and beginnings. If you're reading along in the book, you also realize that what Bob is doing is he's taking a metaphysical, a very unity metaphysical viewpoint of the story in the Old Testament of the Israelites leaving captivity in Egypt and wandering through the wilderness, eventually making their way to the Promised Land. Looking at that very large span of history, rich with lots of symbology, and pulling out of it this theme of transition, this theme of endings, the void, and beginnings. Today we want to take a look at the void. Endings, which we explored last week, are usually event-driven. Endings tend to be rather specific. They have a starting point and an ending point, if you will, to the ending. When we are experiencing a significant ending in our life, the ending of a primary relationship, the loss of a loved one, the ending of a certain lifestyle or sexual identity, for example, when we experience a significant ending, there is usually a lot of turmoil, a lot of change, a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. If we were to try to visualize an ending in terms of Mother Nature, we might say that an ending feels like a tornado, or it feels like an earthquake, a lot of upheaval. Whereas the void tends to feel almost flat and empty. Almost flat and empty. It's as if everything that came up and that was shifting and changing and dramatic and painful and frightening and difficult is now over, but we're not yet in a place where something new and great and wonderful and clear has made itself known and manifest in our lives, and we find ourselves in what we might say is like a no man's land. When I spoke about this a little bit last week, quite a few people came through the line and said, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly where I feel like I am right now. I really feel like I'm in that in-between place." You may recall that last week's lesson was entitled When One Door Closes. And of course the idea is that when one door closes, what? Another door opens. This week's lesson is entitled, But It's Hell in the Hallway. I wish I could take credit for that. I think it is very creative, and quite honestly, I think oftentimes it's exactly the way it feels. Yes, we know that when one door closes, another door opens, but gosh, that hallway can be really difficult. Sometimes it can feel like an endless hallway. I shared, I believe it was last week, I'm not sure if it was this service or first service, that the hallway, the void, wouldn't necessarily feel quite as difficult as it does if somehow we had a date for it. Right? If we just knew, okay, yes, I'm in this hallway. I know it feels kind of flat and empty right now and uncertain, but if I just knew when I was going to step through the doorway to the new, it'd be so much easier to be hanging out in the hallway for a while. But I don't know how it is for you. I do know for me that those periods in my life where I have felt as if I'm in a void, and I actually feel like I'm in a void right now, that those periods don't come with a due date or an end date. They require my digging in deep and practicing everything that I know spiritually while I wait to be shown what it is that God's going to put into my empty hands so that then I can move forward into a new beginning. So I want to share just a few key points with you about the void, and then I want to wrap it up at the end and give you some do's and don'ts if you find yourself in the void right now. The first key is, in fact, to remember that while an ending time is often a time of upheaval and confusion and chaos and, in a way, an awful lot of energy expended outward, that the void tends to be a quiet time. The void tends to be a relatively flat time, or we might even describe it as an empty time. It's a time of uncertainty for us. Another key point is to appreciate that for most of us, the void touches some of our very deepest fears. You see, as human beings, we so want to live with a certain sense of certainty, do we not? We want things to make sense. We're much more comfortable stepping into something new and experiencing with clarity a new beginning than we are in sitting in this place of not knowing and uncertainty. And yet, a key point about this thing that we call the void is that this emptiness is a rich time for us to be able to probe much deeper into ourselves and try to get some clarity around who are we really now? What is it that we are really longing for? What is it that Spirit is inviting us to do or to become? You see, in this place of the void, in this place of emptiness, where it's clear that something has ended, but it's not yet clear what's going to take its place, in this expanse of the void, in this expanse of the emptiness, sometimes we can see much more clearly, much further, and much deeper. Have you ever had the experience of walking through a forest in the springtime where the trees are just bursting forth with foliage and greenery and beauty, and it's so dense that you really can't see very far? And then if you happen to walk in that forest, that same forest in wintertime when all the leaves have dropped, you will find that you can see other things much more clearly and much further than you ever could before. The emptiness of the void has that same potential for us, but we have to look with different eyes. We have to look with the eyes of faith. We have to look with the eyes of insight. And we have to be willing not to rush that experience and that time, but to really sit with it. And sitting with something that is unknown is not particularly easy for us in this culture and in this day and age. Would you agree? We're much more comfortable in an active, engaged, doing capacity than we are in the capacity of letting go, being with, and being present. And this is one of the reasons that when we find ourselves in a void in our lives, that we tend to be very quick to want to fill it with something. And when we try to fill that void with something prematurely or too quickly, it usually winds up backfiring for us. And it backfires either in that what we try to put in its place is not nearly as good as what could have come in its place if we had been willing to sit a little longer and be more receptive to Spirit. Or what we put in its place is really an act of numbing ourselves. We might put in its place some form of addiction or some form of behavior just so that we don't have to be in that place of not knowing. Bob points out in the book, and I agree, that there are seasons to our soul, just as there are seasons to nature. There are seasons and phases and changes to our soul, just as there are to nature. The poet Khalil Gibran put it this way: could you keep your heart open and wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy, and you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. Another key point is that we must really recognize that each season is to be honored. It's so easy to look at new beginnings and say, we're going to honor that, right? We celebrate new beginnings, do we not? We don't usually celebrate endings. And we certainly don't celebrate the emptiness of the void. And yet I want to challenge us to say that each of these, while maybe we're not prepared to celebrate them, that each of them need to be honored. In the same way that the seasons of nature are all necessary. We may have our preferred season, and probably most of us in this room do. That's why we live in California, right? We may have our preferred season climatically, but we know in our heart of hearts that every season is necessary. Every season serves a purpose. Endings in our lives serve a purpose. Endings create the opportunity for something new to come forth. After first service, one of our members, Rich Poser, reminded me of an incident and a picture that he had taken of our Stallion Oaks Ranch shortly after the fires that ranch sustained. I think it was in 2003, I think it was. We lost a lot of our trees, a lot of our property. And a few weeks after the fires had died down, a small group of us were out walking through. And it looked as if that entire property was covered with snow because there was so much ash from all the trees and buildings that had burned. But Rich happened, he's a photographer, happened to see one amazing shoot pushing up through the ash and the soot. That shoot proving that even in what is most desolate, what seems to be wiped clean and void and empty, that there is still life, new life, that's wanting to come through. And what a visual for us in our own life journey when we find ourselves in that place of transition, that place where very clearly something has ended, but the new has not yet made itself known. Just a few days ago, John and I dropped our daughter Jennifer off at college. She starts her third year. And Jonathan, our son, already graduated. So a part of me already knows I'm in this void called the empty nest. But I also know that it feels, some of you are giggling because you've been there, or you're there now too. But it feels different right now. This void feels even more voidish, is that even a word, like a bigger void, than the first goodbye to my son, or even the last goodbye to my daughter. And what I know is in this void, in this place of, yes, something is clearly ending, no doubt about that, but I'm not sure what's beginning. I'm not sure what wants to not take its place per se, but what wants to come through that has to do with a new me. And I share that because I know those of you in this room now that are also in your period of a void are in that same place. Something's ended, and you know that for sure, but you haven't identified yet, or it hasn't been identified yet for you, what that new is. Can you honor this space called in between? Can you honor the hallway? Can you honor, take your hands if you will for a moment. Can you honor your empty hands? And can you say that maybe the richness of this experience is not for you to go figure out right now what to put in those empty hands, but instead to sit symbolically and literally in a place of trusting Spirit to reveal to you what really is meant to be put in your empty hands next. You know, who are you to be? Who are you in the process of becoming? Those of us on a spiritual path are always in that kind of deeper question. Those of us in this kind of spiritual teaching are always asking, what are the husks of my old self that are meant to fall away now, so that who I am meant to be now in my life can take its form, understanding that there will always be endings of void and beginnings and endings of void and beginnings, and honoring each and every part of the process. I think in Eastern teachings, there is much more comfort and a much greater embracing of this idea of the void and the emptiness. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu writes, in the pursuit of learning, every day something is acquired. In the pursuit of Tao, every day something is dropped. Every day something is dropped. This from Meister Eckhart, a 13th century German mystic. God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction. You know, another key point for us to embrace and understand is that the void is not about adding to, it's about emptying out. And we tend so much in our country, in our culture, in our generation, to think that growth is always about adding something more. I mean, how do we, on one level, measure the success of our country? By our gross national product, which is all about more what? Stuff. While that is certainly a measurement, I'm not sure it's the best or healthiest measurement always, and certainly on the level of the soul, it is not a measurement at all. On the soul level, it's a measurement really of divestment. It's a measurement really, or process really, of letting go. That which we are in our truest self, in our truest sense, that the identity we were born with before we had a face, the Buddhists would say, is what we are wanting to shine through and express. So before I share with you just a few do's and don'ts, if you find yourself in this time of the void, let me encourage you to sit with a powerful question. And the question is this: in order to become who you really are you willing to let go of who you are not? In order to become who you truly are, are you willing to let go of who you are not? So that's homework assignment number 1. And then here are some tips, a few do's and don'ts. If you're in the void, first of all, I want to share a statement that I just saw in my notes that Robert makes in the book. I really like it. The void is a passageway to becoming truly alive and awake. The void is a passageway to becoming truly alive and awake, kind of like a birth canal if you think about it, right? Truly alive and awake. Okay, first thing is this: avoid making any major decisions or long-term commitments if you're in the void. Avoid making any major decisions or long-term commitments if you're in the void. Why? Because the person in the void who is making that long-term decision or commitment is likely not going to be the person who has to live with the decision. Because remember, the void is a passageway to a new life, really. A new you, a much newer version of yourself. So you don't want to make any major decisions when you're in that void. The second is don't try to hurry it. And even though part of you, and maybe I'm only talking to myself here, wishes that you had a specific end date as a target to work toward, Even without that, be willing to not hurry the process. The Israelites tried to hurry and push through to the promised land. There's a whole story we could go into about that, but they weren't ready. And because they weren't ready, because they responded to the potential threats in the promised land out of fear and not faith, because they tried to hurry that process, they needed to wander another 40 years in the wilderness, meaning until that consciousness was no longer part of them. So for us in the void, the willingness to not hurry the process is really key. Third, do not abandon your prayer and meditation practice. It is essentially important during this time period. And you may find that during this period of the void, that your prayer and meditation life feels different. And it might not feel as good as it usually does. I know that during my times in the void, my prayer and meditation life, while still consistent, doesn't seem to be as deep and as easy as when I'm not in the void. But what I know is to drop my expectations that my prayer and meditation practice will always feel exactly the same way. What I know is the consistency of the practice is what is most important. And the consistency of the practice in the end will always bear rich and abundant fruit. So don't give up your practice while you're in the void. If anything, amplify your practice and be patient with yourself if it doesn't seem to be as good as you know it has been in the past. And 2 more do's. Do keep a journal. Start writing. And maybe it doesn't have to be every day, but make it frequently enough that you're checking in with your inner self and you're writing whatever seems to be going on. Not externally. This isn't your diary like as a young boy or girl you may have kept, when you were 12 years old. It's not today I did this and boy I did that. It's not that. It's what's going on inside. And just journal about it. How are you feeling about the void? What thoughts do you have about it? What's going on inside? And then the last is to pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention to your dreams. What I know is during the void, our dream life can be a really rich source of deep insight and intuition, a deep peek, if you will, into what's going on in our soul and in our psyche. So pay attention to your dreams. And if you think you don't dream, I'm going to challenge you and say, yeah, you do. You probably just haven't trained yourself to remember them. And one very simple thing you can do that will help you with that is as you fall asleep at night, is to just prayerfully affirm, I shall remember my dreams. I'd like to remember my dreams. And plant that thought, and then be patient. You'll start to remember. If you get up in the middle of the night with a dream, positive or negative one, jot it down. If you wake up in the morning, have you ever had this feeling? You wake up in the morning and you know you dreamt because you're in a funny kind of energetic space. Nod your head if you've had that. Jot that down, even if you don't remember the details of the dream. But begin to pay attention, because in the void, there's a richness that's going on in our psyche and our soul. And we need to pay attention to it if we're going to harvest that. So that the beginning, which we're going to talk about next week, that the beginning can be launched on solid, firm, faith-filled foundation. Namaste.